Good morning and welcome back to our tutorial on web design. We are currently on HTML, and in our last class we talked about the basic syntax of HTML. We also looked at the difference between tags and attributes and elements. We were able to explain all of it, and the interface you see here represent exactly what we did the previous time. We're able to use some of these tags. We even use the style attributes to add beautification and more meaning to our tag in our HTML file. So today we are going to look at some other examples of tags that are useful in web design. So we'll go ahead and create a new file here. The first one we're going to be looking at for today will be the table tag. So I'll create table. Remember, every extension of your web page must be .html. So if you are designing a website, so I'll write table.html and then I'm going to save it. So I'll generate the basic syntax of of HTML here, and then I'll call it our table. So if you have not gone through our previous tutorial, I think you should take a look at it. You understand better the meaning of this syntax that I auto-generated here. So there's no need for me to start writing it manually, as we have already explained what each and every of this tag does to our web page. So go ahead and generate it like I have done here. So when I'll create a header tag, a heading tag. We have talked about this heading tag in our previous class. So I'll just say our table. So if you look at this, it's auto-generated by the left hand side here. All right. So when you talk about table, right, the first thing you actually that should come to your mind is that a table have rows and columns. A table is divided into rows and columns, right? So, and you first of all specify that you want to design a table, and you know that for every corresponding opening tag that you have, you must have the closing tag, right? So if we have that and we go ahead to we have our table here, so the first thing we need to do is to specify that we need to have rows and column. And if you don't have rows in your table, you cannot have a column. So we'll first specify that we want a table row. So if you have this table row, right, so whatever is inside of this row must be the columns, and a table row is represented by tr. When it is auto-generated at this place, I will explain more of what it does. So if we have td here, which is the table data, it represents table data, tr represents table row. So the table data is just like the columns of your table. So where you have your columns enclosed by your rows. So I will explain that. So if you have a serial number, you have serial number here, you can see it's generated here. So if I duplicate this and I have names, address, and place of birth, you can see that they are all represented here, right? So I can add more. Now we have a row excuse me, we have a row, and within our row we have columns. All right, so if you hover it here, you will see the columns is where we write the data in our table. So if we have this table right now, is as if it's joined together like a text. So we can add an attribute called border. It automatically add border to it. So I want to add width to it to be 100%, so that it can cover the entire space for us to be able to work with this data. So We're using HTML. That is why we are majorly styling with attributes. So the time is coming that we'll go into CSS. We see how we can add more beautification to this table without using much attributes, but just the class attributes for appending um, a style sheet class to it. So if I come here and I open another table row, like this from the serial number down to date of birth is what forms a row. You can see that a row is just on one line here, right? If I create another row and I have let's say sorry, and I create a new table data, I create a new table data and I say serial number one, you see that it's created here. So I'm going to create a new column and call it, the name is let's say John Doe. You can see address, create another table data. I will call it his address is let's say oh of the, so we have another column called date of birth TD, and let's say it's 14th 14th April 2002 2002, right? So you see that we have a complete row here. We have a complete row here. So you might not have the extension to preview your table as I've done, so you can literally go to where you save it. I saved it is Tekra tutorials here, and you can see we have the table.html, the same table that we created from this place, right? So if I go back to this place and double click it, you can see that we have our table here. It's covering the entire page because I set the width of our table to be 100%. So I can have as much data that I want, as much rows as I want. So if I want more rows, I can just simply come and maybe duplicate this. You can see I can start changing this data to, you can see /4 of Kanga Street. So you can see, just change the second, sorry, the first data is supposed to be 1, it's supposed to have 2, supposed to have 3, supposed to have 4. I'll delete, I think we only need 4. I'll just delete the rest. Let's just work with 4. So you see we have all these. I can change the data to whichever one I want. In 1995. So you can see if I come to the browser here too and refresh it, right, you can you can see that we have the same data that I rendered from here too. So this place help me to preview the data here, or you can, if you want, if you're unable to achieve this here, you can go to the browser and refresh it. Whatever you have added or updated will be rendered or displayed there. So if we want to take, for instance, we have two types of rows here. The first row, which carries the headings to our table, right? So if we want, we can come and specify that this first row that we have here is the table head. So by covering it with T head, so the rest here is our table body. So we come here and we'll come and cover it with C body. So I'll come to the end and cover it here. So you see that we have now been able to differentiate our types of rows here. So the first one, which is always the heading, which is this serial number, names, address, date of birth, is part of our table head. So we wrap the whole table row or TR in our table head. Then we go down here. The rest of the table rows here are just the data, so, or the body of the table. So we wrap it in our table head here, as you can see. So there's another thing. If you want to specify that the first table, the first table row only carries the heading, then this table data should not be table data. It should be T head, table heading. So come on, replace our or our table data with th or, yeah. So you can see that by doing that, the serial number, names, address, and date of birth became bold the moment I replace them and refresh. If you come back to the browser here, you see that if you change this from the way it is now to become more bolder, specifying that this is the headings of the table. And if you notice very well, previously when you used td, right, by default the content of your table data is aligned left, but the moment I change it to th, the headings of the table, it automatically align it center. So the moment you specify that this tag is the moment you specify that the moment you specify that the rows here are going to be the table headings, HTML knows that it's supposed to make it bolder to show that it's the headings, and HTML also knows that it's supposed to automatically align them center to show that they are the heading. So for now, this is all about table in HTML. So you can write as much tables as you want, combined with the previous things we have done. You can use them. Table is combining with the previous things we have done. Table is one of the most essential part of HTML, because in a situation where you want to represent your data, right, a table will give you the appropriate medium for you to be able to represent your data. Looking at lists, so HTML list .html, yeah. So I'll generate the basic syntax of HTML and I'll name this as HTML list. We can decide to write all this in one file, but in order for us to have a better and cleaner codes, we have to just represent them singly on each file so that you can be able to understand individually whatever we are doing. So like this practice.html, I did some basics, heading tags, paragraph tags, and some other tags here. So on the table, I did the table basically. On this practice, I explain a lot here. So if you have not watched the video, you should take your time, go back to the part of the video, and have a full grasp of whatever we did on this particular file. So for our list, we have HTML have two types of list. We have the ordered and the unordered list. So when you have list like one, let's say you have list of people, and you have John Doe. Number two, you have John Daniel. You have number three. You have Doctor Strange, and so many names that you want. So this becomes an ordered list. So an ordered list is a sequential form of list that is represented by this numeric or these numbers. So when you have an ordered list, you can use circle, images, or whatever to represent the list that you have written. So what are the tags for listing? So when you are listing items, so you specify it by using the li. The li represents list. So when you don't specify what type of list this becomes, it automatically takes on other lists are the types of lists you want to use. So let's say you have home, you have music, you have login, then you have register. So you can see they are all represented as other list. If you want to explicitly specify that the list you are writing is an unordered list, you write ul. So by covering it, your list with ul, you are telling this thing that okay, what you are doing is an ordered list. So in a situation where you want an ordered list, so you replace with ol. Have to rest special for it. So I'll come here, I'll duplicate this, and then I'll if I have ol here, right, you can see that without me having to write 1 2 3 the way I wrote it before, and I refreshed, so you see that it represents exactly what I intended doing. It lists the first one represent an unordered list, while the second one represent an ordered list. If you notice very well, each line of list here, as you can see here, typically represents a block form of code. So initially when I did not cover the list with, if I did not cover the 1 2 3 I was writing with a list, you discover that if I write 1 and I write, let's say, Moses, and I even scroll, I entered and write 2, it does not really break on another line because HTML does not recognize this as a list, but it's rather seeing it as a text, seeing it like something like a paragraph. So, and you know that paragraph is a block line of code. It does not break except you specify it to break. So if I write down here, this does not go to another line except I force it by specifying the break. So that is when it will come to the other line. But there is no need to stress yourself doing that when you have a list tag to specify what types of to actually specify what type of list you want to do. Okay, so if let's try something. So when you tell an ordered list the type of representation you want, the kind of character you want it to represent with as the list, right? You can supply the type attribute to your ordered list. Like here, I just tell it that it should be an alphabet and it should be capital letter. If you specify the capital letter as the type, it represents all your list symbols to be capital letters. So if I replace this with small letters, all of them will be replaced with small letters, and it should be sequential, as you can see here. So if I want it to have the Roman numerals, right, we are going to have these two. And if I want it a small letter Roman numerals, I just apply the I, then automatically it becomes like this. So for this on other list types, you can also, there are a lot, right? So there are many types of list characters that you can use to on other lists. One of them is disk. There are many others like circle, but when we get to CSS, we'll see how we can dynamically replace the icons of the list for both the unordered list for both the list and the unordered list, and also how we can be able to remove it. Let's say we want to be able to remove this list from it. We don't want it to append to it, so because even if you don't specify the type, there's a default type for it, which is 1 2 3 4 to the number of lists that you have. So we'll be able to tell CSS to help us remove this thing so that it doesn't contain the the sequential numbering that is appended to our list. So list is very important. When you look at navigation bar, a list is used to write it. When you are browsing a website and you see something like a navigation bar like home, music, login, so in most cases they use lists to write that, but sometimes you see them displayed in one line. So in that case, when we get to CSS, we'll see how that can be achieved, how they do it so that list gets displayed on one line without this bullets or numbering appended to it. So another thing we want to look at is link. We have looked at link before, and I want us to look at it again. Link basically helps us to navigate between one page to another. In fact, there's nothing much on link. You just specify the anchor tag to it, then you specify the attributes of the reference to which the link will go to when you click it. So I think we have done this before. There is basically no need. If I want to go to practice.html, so all I just need to do is to specify the in the href, I'll specify the practice.html to it. So you can see it here, but the text that you see here is what is written inside here. So between the opening tag of the anchor tag and the closing tag. So if I right go to practice and I click on it, it should take me there. It's not supposed to open the listing as a file, but let's come here and open it. You see that it went there. All right, so if you click on go to practice, this is the page we built for practice. So if you click it and you see that the title service is my first website. If I go back, you see that HTML is the title for this for the list page we built. So that is it for this one. All right, so there is nothing much on list. Maybe when we start using it practically, you'll be able to see how it works. We have also looked at images, and the image tags written as img src, which specify the source or the location where the image is. So now let's talk about path. So a path is where an image or a file or a resource is located, right? So let's say let me create a new HTML file and call it path. Okay, let's say HTML is HTML path. So we have HTML path, right? So if I come here and I write img and src, so this src is what specifies the resource, the location to where our resource is. So let's take for instance I have an sorry, let's take for instance I have Tekra limited .jpg here, right? So since the Tekra limited jpg is on the same location with path, I don't need to specify any special address for it, right? So I'll just simply come here and say Tekra limited.jpg. So automatically the reason why this image is showing broken is because this preview is unable to interpret it as an image. So I'll simply just come to this place. So you can see that this is the image. Let's make it smaller so that you can let's say 50%. So if we refresh it, it's supposed to become smaller, right? All right, great. So now the reason why we are able to directly access this image here is because the image is on the same the same folder with our path.html, the same HTML file we are using to load the image. So let's say I create a new folder and I call it images, and then I move this Tekra limited.jpg to the image folder. Automatically, now you can see that the images folder is where our Tekra limited .jpg is. If I come back to this place and refresh it, it will show a broken image. If you inspect this, you will see that it will tell you that, and you go to console, it will tell you that failed to load resource, file not found. And what is the file? Tekra limited.jpg. Great. So now, how do we load the image? Now, the reason why it's no longer loading is because the path and the images and the image is no longer on the same no longer on the same folder. The image is now inside the folder of this folder. So how do we address it? So we have to come here and tell our source that you should climb inside the images folder. Can see, so since the path is on this folder here, right, on the same folder with the images folder, so we'll now tell our source to go inside the images folder and then go inside the tekra.jpg. If inside the images folder I have another folder called logo, so now I have a logo and I move Tekra limited inside it, right? You can see that inside images we have another folder called logo, and then it's inside the folder that we have Tekra limited. So if I still come here and refresh this image, it will not work. So I need to come and tell my path that, okay, image, you are inside the images folder and you are inside the logo folder, and inside the logo folder is where the Tekra limited.jpg is. If you come and refresh this, right, it will now appear. So that is what path is all about. So in a situation where you have let me move it back and delete the logo folder. No longer work because we are accessing it through the logo folder, which is no longer in existence. So we'll just simply come and remove the address of the logo from it. So if we refresh it, see that it has appeared. So let me okay. So in a situation where you have let's say we have a folder called parts. Now we have images. We have the images folder, we have the part folder. I will move this part.html down there. So can you see that now the part.html is inside the folder called parts and our image is inside the folder called images? How do we address such situation? In such situation, there is a need to go back. There's a need to go back. First of all, what we'll do is that we go back from this folder to the main folder, then we access the image folder. How do we do that? The simplest way to do it is you press the ../. Now that we have pressed the ../, we now have access to the images. Then we now have access to this. So the dot is coming out of this part. The dot helps us to navigate the path backward one step. If I have another folder inside and I call it if I refresh it, it's going to work now. Okay, so the reason why it's not loading the file again is because path.html is not in the Tekra tutorial folder. So we'll go there, open the path folder and open it, and you see that it will work. Alright, great. So if we come back to this place, let's say we have another folder and we call it we'll call it order page. I will move the path folder inside. So from what you have seen here, we have a folder. Okay, let me go back. We have Tekra tutorials. Everything we have done so far is inside. We have the image folder. We have a folder called path. So our path.html is inside path, and which is inside. And inside the path, we have a order page, which actually houses the path.html. So if we open it, you see path.html. If you open it now, the image is broken because we only went backward by one step. So if you go back by one step from path.html here, we will be inside the path folder. So we need to go back another step. That is when we will now enter Tekra tutorial before we can be able to enter images. So to go back by another step, you simply ../. So now by ../, we have gone back two steps. We have gone back two steps to be able to access the images folder. So if you don't understand what path is and how to go back and go forward, you can drop your comment on the comment section. We'll always respond to it. Drop your concerns and we'll treat it so that you will be able to follow along. So now this is how to load image and this is how to specify the path. So the reason why I had to do this is because paths are important. When you are working on a large web project, it is very important to understand paths so that you will be able to access the resources. Can be images, can be new files. Let's say I have a list.html inside path self and I want to access it. I need to still access it as path. So you see, path is really very important. All right. So another important topic in HTML we want to look at is form. So I'll create a new file and call it form.html. So form is just a medium in HTML that enables us to collect inputs from users. So, so there are forms help us to collect user inputs or whatever the user wants to send to the system. So there is no better way to collect it except using forms, right? So they are just like input fields, checkboxes, just generally any medium that you want to use to collect inputs from your website users. So now what is the tag for form? So to specify that you want to create form, you use the form tag. So the form tag has an opening tag and a closing tag, just as I've seen before. So there are some attributes that your form must carry. So one of it is action. Action tells us where you want this form to go to. So what does action mean? What does the go to mean? So if I click on the submit button within a form, right, where do I want this form to take me to when I am done filling it? So that is what the action this is what the action does. So we have another attribute called the method. So we have basically two types of method in HTML. We have the post and the get method. So I will explain what the two does. So by default, if you don't supply the method of HTML form, it automatically see it as a get method. So now there are several types of input fields that you can use to collect data from your user. So one of it is using the default input tag. See, immediately I wrote it, it appears here, right? So this is how it is. It doesn't have a closing tag, rather it's self-enclosed. So you see, if I want to collect, let's say, name from user now, I can come and have, let's say, paragraph and say enter your name. So you see, it wrote it for me here. So I have to name, I want to name this my input to be name, right? So I'll just say name because we are collecting name. So if I have another field called let's say address, so I can also come here, input name, I'll say address. So now we have two types of input. And now if I need a button where I want to submit, I enable me to, after I fill this form, let's say my name is John Doe, my address is France. So if I want to submit this form, I need a button where I will submit it. How do I create that? I'll just simply come and say, let me have a break so that it doesn't join together. So I have an input type, it will be submit. So name is submit button. So you see, so value now I can say submit now. By default, you see that the name the value is submit, but when I provide the value attribute now, it replaces whatever I want. So if I want to make it a register button, I can always change it like this. Let me separate it so that there is space. So now you see I have I now have a form. Right? So if I want, I can just provide a field set here so that the entire, so now I've created a form with field set and a submit button. So now there's something very important I want you to understand when we are dealing with form. When you are dealing with form, every input field have its own type. They may not always be the same, but we call them data types. So every input field may differ. So when you want to supply the default data type for input tag is text. So when you want to specify the input type, you have to come here and specify it here. So now when I'm entering text here, right? So the kind of data that this input field will accept is text. So we have several other types of input. If I want to collect a number, so I will specify this to be number. So the only input that this field can accept is a number. It cannot accept alphabet. So can only type 1 2 3, and it will give me this for me to be able to increase the number or even reduce the number correspondingly. Very good. So we have learned how to use inputs, and we have how to also specify the type of input we want to collect. We can make it text. Type can be text by which is by default anyway, and then we can have number as this thing. We have other types of input fields too for users to enter their date of birth. Enter, or let's say pick date of birth. So now we need an input type with a calendar type. So now I'll call it DOB. So if we have this input, you can see it here automatically. So if I click on this calendar, it will give me a day for me to be able to select and be able to scroll through it and select whatever date I want. So there are several types of uh, input type for the input tag. So there are several types attributes for the inputs that you can be able to use depending on whatever you want. So we have been able to use number, we use text, and we use date. There are several others, and you can make your personal research depending on whatever you are building. Right? So we have other types of inputs like the select. So for example, I want to select our country. So let's say I have a paragraph and I say, sorry, I'm not breaking. Say select country. So if I have country, then country is always in a drop down. So I should use the select input use. So I'll select, I'll call the name to be country, right? So now inside it you have options. The options, now we have to specify the value. Let's say Iran. So this value is what is used at the back, while the one you see here is what gets displayed for the user to see at the interface. So I'll specify Iraq here. So Iraq. So Nigeria. So you see, if I click here, you see that I now have option to select which of the countries I want, right? So that is what I want. So now you see there's another attribute called required that you can add to a form, that if it is not filled, the submit button will not work for the user to submit it to enter the action that is supposed to go to. So for instance, if I type if I do not fill this first one, which is name, let me change it to text. So if I not fill it and I click on submit, it will pop up uh, this warning telling me please fill in this field. So until I fill it, I will not be able to submit to the specified action here. So this required attribute is sometimes very important when you want to enforce strict rule that this particular field must be filled in a form. So we have talked about all this one. We have also, we select, let's have another this thing, select all that applies. So now we'll use the checkbox. So if I have input type checkbox, you can see if I want, I can come and say tick this. So I'll specify a name for it. Let's say I select all that applies. I'll call it, let's say, conditions, right? So I can have many let's say I have options. Are you social? Are you a foodie? So I can decide to select all. I can decide to select one. I can check and uncheck. So as far as they belong to the same name, when we submit it to the back, we can be able to get all inputs that are related to the conditions as a name. So that is what the checkbox help us to do. So we have another one called radio input type. Radio. Let's say we want user to select the agenda. So select gender. If you don't use the drop down select to do this, you can simply just use radio here, right? So sorry, there's a mistake here. Select gender. It's a mistake. So if we have select gender and I have a radio, and I say gender here, and I say male. If I have another input with the same name and call it female, I can be able to toggle between this gender, right? So how do I mean? If I click on male and I click on female, the male will untoggle like that. So the difference between it is that you can select multiple for the checkbox, but you can only select single for a radio input. So So when you are dealing with options where you can only select one, you use the radio. There are options where you can select multiple, you use the checkbox. So now the reason why if I select the male, the female deactivates, and when I select the female, the male uncheck or unselect is because I am using this same name here. So if I change this one to order and I click it, I can click this one and click this one at the same time because there are no two radio buttons bearing the same name, so it doesn't untoggle the radio. But the moment I use the same name in the input, I can be able to untoggle anyone. I can select this one, deselect. If I click on this one, this other one automatically deselect. So this is how inputs work. So I'll advise you to go practice. So now let's link, let's create a new file and call it profile.html. So inside profile.html, I'll name the title to be my profile. So here I can say welcome to my profile. So here in our form, I will connect this page to link to my profile. So if I come here and I specify profile.html, so the moment I fill this form, right, and I click on the register, it will take me directly to profile.html and render it. So let's go and do that from our form here. So we have name, I will say Bishop. So we have address, my home. I'll select date of birth, and then I'll select Iraq as my country. I'm social, I'm also a foodie. Then I'll select my gender to be male. If I click on register, it will directly take me here. It will take me to profile because if you watch here very well, my action points to profile.html. So after I am done filling this form here and I submit it, it takes me there. So now let me explain the method attribute. So if you specify the method attributes to the form, it tells the form how you want to submit the data that you are filling inside the form, right? So how do I mean? The method, we have two types of method like I explained previously. We have the post method and the get method. So when you submit the form with the get method, the data that you fill here are appended to the URL of the new page it is going to. In our case, it is profile.html. So let me demonstrate. So I'll fill this, I'll come here, my home, I'll select the date of birth, and then I'll select Iraq. I'll select that I am a foodie, and then I'll select that I'm a male. If I submit, it will take me to profile.html and then append the values I have filled in this form to it, as you can see here. So you can see that name is Action Congress, address is my home, date of birth is appended the date of birth, country, Iraq, conditions only this one. So gender is also, so there's a mistake I made here. So if you want the value of male to also be appended to it, you have to come here and specify the value here to be male, while the value here should be female. Also here, if value here should be social, and the value here should be holy. So when I fill this, when I select any of these, it automatically will append the value that we have selected. If you automatically append the value here, you can see we have country Nigeria, I'm social, and my gender is male, as you can see here too. So now this is what the get method does, or this is what the get method automatically do to our form. It collect the inputs that you are filling from the form and append it to the URL of your website. So when you don't want that to happen, when you want the inputs to be hidden and not be appended to the URL, you use the post method, right? So you can just simply come here and use the post method. If I refresh here now, the form will be seen as a post kind of form. So if I select Gabriel Daniel as the name, I'll say home. If I select date of birth and I select Iraq, I can select any of these ones here. If I click on register, you see that the values I fill from the form did not get appended to the URL of the new page or the action that it goes to. So the form method, the get method of the form displays the data in or appends the data in the URL of our website, while the post method does not. So this is all we'll go about the form. You can research more on depending on whatever you want to build, but for the basics form, this is what you will be needing. So in our subsequent classes, we'll look at how we can start building a web page and start applying styles, CSS styles to it to make it look more beautiful and more advanced.